Israel's parliament had never debated Dimona or nuclear weapons until one MP 3 years ago forced them onto the agenda for the first time. Issam Mahul, an Israeli Arab, broke the taboo to the outrage of his colleagues. These words, uttered in the heart of Israel's democracy, was seen by his fellow MPs as a sacrilege. He wasn't allowed to finish his speech, but he'd made his point. But in his constituency during the recent election campaign, it was a different story. Here, his audience are, like him, Israeli Arabs.
بدهم يفتشوا عن أسلحة دمار شامل وأسلحة نووية. أنا بقول لهم وين في أسلحة نووية وأسلحة دمار شامل إذا بدهم. أنا بقول لهم وين موجودة. في ديمونا موجودة، في خليج حيفا، في جبل علبون، في منطقة سخنين، يدفاتا. بدهم أسلحة نووية؟ بدهم أسلحة دمار شامل؟ يجوا يفتشوا، يبعثوا مفتشين، أنا باخذهم من إيدهم.
There is a cry going up which is talking about a double standard. The world has to check Iraq's nuclear installations, but not Israel's.
How can you compare it? Iraq is a dictatorship. Saddam Hussein is a killer. He killed 100,000 Kurds with gas bombs. How can you compare it at all? Just because he calls himself a state? Not a state, is a mafia. He's not a leader, he's a killer. You cannot say it about us.
But even in Israel, some do. The current Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, directed the invasion of Lebanon in 1982. Thousands of innocent civilians were killed. The worst excesses were in the refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila, for which an Israeli inquiry held Sharon personally responsible. In Belgium, there are plans to prosecute him for alleged war crimes. While Sharon has been Prime Minister, 700 Israelis have been killed, but more than 2,000 Palestinians have died in attacks by Israeli soldiers. The Israeli army has used new, unidentified weapons. In February 2001, a new gas was used in Gaza. 180 patients were admitted to hospitals with severe convulsions.
The Israelis say this is tear gas, but this is not tear gas. We have never seen this gas before. We need some medicine for treatment, but it must be the right medicine.
We ask what kind of gas, but nobody verified for us the type of gas to give the antidote at that moment. Also, we don't know how to check, how to examine, how to send this. We are in occupied area. We are surrounded. It's impossible to send these samples to international lab to test.
Israel's outside chemical and biological weapons treaties and still refuses to say what the new gas was. The Elofs have still not heard from the prison. Their flight home is tomorrow night, and they're worried that they may have to leave without seeing their adopted son. Today they're having lunch with a small group of activists who, for 16 years, have fought in vain for Vanunu's release.
About nuclear weapons, what about Israel and the nuclear weapons?
Imagine for one moment that Mordechai Vanunu was not an Israeli, that the whole story had happened with a Korean or an Iranian or a Pakistani technician. He would have had the Nobel Peace Prize. He would have been the second Sakharov. Instead, he is a non-person in the West. And this tells you what we are dealing with. We are dealing with the #1 privileged state on earth.
Counter to the Israeli argument that the whole world is against us, it is exactly the opposite. We started the nuclear race in the Middle East. There's no doubt about it. And there is not even one important state in the Western Hemisphere who is dealing with it seriously.
You can talk all you want. We can sit here till tomorrow morning and discuss Israel's nuclear policy. We can discuss whatever we want. It's the people who work in those areas, in the weapons of mass destruction, the environment, Dimona itself, all these research places. Vanunu is a living warning to them. This is what will happen to you if you speak out. You'll be Vanunized. That's the warning. You will spend 10 years in solitary confinement. You will be cut off from your family. You will be cut off from everyone who knows you. You will be this prisoner without a number and without a name. That's what will happen to you if you speak out.
It's the prison on the phone.
Oh, what did... Oh, how marvelous. What time? Well, if we come at 11, can we have an hour and a half? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
On their last day, the Elofs get their visit. After an hour and a half, they emerge with a message.
It's just wonderful. We're so excited we don't know what to think because he's... Oh, yeah, you talk.
It was a marvelous experience. It's the first time we've ever seen him so high and just anxious to talk about what's going on in his life and what he's looking forward to, especially the anticipation of getting out. He's just strong. That was his final word. Let him know that I'm strong and anxious to get out of here and out of Israel and just start a life all over again.
Yeah.
He was just beaming, I must say.
And he said the message to the world is that I have forgotten the last 16 years. I'm looking toward the future. I believe in a future of nonviolence.
So did he say he'd do it all again?
You know he did. He said, of course I would. Isn't that incredible?
The Elofs have gone and Vanunu is again up for parole. But as usual, everything, even the location of the parole hearing, is secret. Apart from me and Peter Hounham, who's come from London, there are no other journalists here.
Mordechai Vanunu in there. Is that where the case is being held?
He is the most sensitive prisoner that this country's got, and whenever he comes here, they block off the windows of his van if they can, or they... In the early days, they used to put a crash helmet over him so people couldn't see him. And at one point, they even had an electronic device that emitted a screeching signal so people couldn't hear him speak.
And yet, you and I are the only journalists here, the most sensitive prisoner Israel's got, and there's not a single member of the press here apart from you. Why do you keep coming? I keep coming because he's in there, because he spoke to me and we published his story in the Sunday Times in 1986, and I feel a sense of responsibility that we should be helping him get out. 3 hours later, the hearing ended. As usual, Vanunu left behind darkened windows. In court, Horev's prosecutor had cited the war with Iraq as a new reason for blocking parole.
The prosecutor, of course, went back to the old argument that Vanunu is a threat to the security, and she even said that if Vanunu will be released, probably the Americans will leave Iraq and go after Israel and Israel nuclear weapons, which I found extremely ridiculous.
Minnesota, the Peace Bridge and a weekly ritual. Every Wednesday, hundreds protest against the war.
Say no to war in Iraq.
Mary's there, so of course is Nick. Every week the numbers grow. There's a new generation of peaceniks who were children when Israel's nuclear weapons were exposed.
Have any of you guys heard of Mordechai Vanunu?
No.
You don't know who he is?
No.
And if I tell you that he's somebody who exposed Israel's weapons of mass destruction, which nobody knew about until then, what would you say?
Why is our media, that's supposed to be free and open, not telling us? And why is our government not letting us know this information if we're living in the home of the free?
I think if our administration was consistent or had any integrity, then he'd be held up as a hero.
We're going to work with the members of the Security Council in the days ahead to make it clear to Saddam that the demands of the world and the United Nations will be enforced.
In Washington, which gives Israel more than $3 billion a year, the talk is only of Iraq. For weeks we've tried to get an interview about Israel's weapons of mass destruction, but no one in this Bush administration wants to talk about Israel. So we've asked for an interview about the military balance of power in the Middle East, and now they've agreed.
This morning we've finally been told that we're going to have an interviewee. He's an expert in all matters Israeli, he's an Undersecretary of Defense, and his name is Douglas Feith.
The Pentagon has demanded a list of questions in advance. So it's the balance of power, Israel's nuclear ambiguity, allegations of a double standard, and Mordechai Vanunu.
The gravest danger facing America and the world is outlaw regimes that seek and possess nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons.
Yet again, the shutters have come down on this story. Our interview with Undersecretary for Defense Douglas Feith was scheduled for 4 o'clock, somewhere in this vast complex of the Pentagon behind me. Yet at the last minute, we've heard the interviews cancelled. Questions about Israel, it appears, are strictly off limits.
We'd received this email from the Pentagon.
Ladies, we showed Mr. Feith the list of topics for the BBC interview. He is not willing to answer any of the questions you listed. Respectfully request you resubmit your questions as soon as possible this morning. Questions directed toward the current Iraqi situation.
On February the 19th, Vanunu was again refused parole. He remains in Ashkelon prison. Horev has let it be known he intends never to let Mordechai Vanunu leave Israel. You can comment on tonight's programme by visiting our website at www.bbc.co.uk/correspondent. Next on Correspondent, America's child soldiers, how the military are taking over America's schools. That's next Sunday at 6:45.